It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. It is great to have you in studio today. We got a very great show for you, and if you're not able to watch it, we're going to do our best to explain what it is we're talking about today and the devices and equipment that Bob Erb has brought with him as well. So we'll do our best, but you're going to want to do your best to try to either catch the show or find it on YouTube later on to watch it, because Bob Erb is with Fort Verde State Historic Park. He's a volunteer there.
Part-time employee right now.
Part-time employee. So Bob, welcome to studio. We are talking Civil War and early Army frontier medicine. And when Ryan got the show set up with you, I was pretty excited about this. And then he said you were going to bring a bunch of actual tools with you that were used during that time period. So that's amazing. Let's start with your uniform. Let's start with that first.
Okay, well, the uniform that I'm wearing is what would be called a hospital steward's uniform. You would have seen this uniform at Fort Verde through the 1870s and into the 1880s. The hospital steward was an enlisted man on post that was recruited. When a surgeon came in, if he needed somebody that was going to work with and help him, he would go to the enlisted ranks, try to find somebody who had maybe some medical experience, but particularly somebody who was literate that could read and write, because this person would have to keep the different records, hospital records, would have to take care of the different types of medicines that were there, and also to assist in any kinds of surgeries he might do, whether it was pulling teeth or whatever it might be. Hospital steward, he was given the rank that's an actual rank as a hospital steward. It was actually one rank higher than first sergeant, so he got an increase in pay, and so this person became part of the medical staff at the fort.
What would be considered medical knowledge back then?
Okay, medical knowledge really had a big range. At Fort Verde, there was, I think there were 27 surgeons or doctors that were at the fort over its period of time, starting from 1865 through 1891.
Wow.
These doctors ranged from a number of them that had medical training at a university, at a medical school back east, but a whole lot of them really didn't have any training at all, other than they were apprentices. Maybe at one time were a hospital steward and eventually worked their way in. And so we had a wide variety of people that were actually considered very good doctors at the time, down to those that were probably pretty bad. So there was no standardization as far as what kind of doctor you got. You took what you could get.
Real quick, what got you involved in this?
What got me involved, well, of course, I've been interested in history as a kid from as long as I can remember. I've been a volunteer at the fort for about 15 years now before I became a part-time employee. But I would go over on weekends and when they had different events, and I would, depending on the event, I would wear a uniform or whatever the outfit may be and walk around and speak to people. And I had folks say, Bob, why don't you go ahead and set up a display like the rest of us? But when I would look at their displays, I would think, well, what I have, as far as the common soldier of the period, I thought, well, I'm really not adding anything new. And so one day I looked at the surgeon's quarters and I said, gee, I've always had an interest in the medicine, and I have some of this stuff. Maybe I can acquire more stuff, acquire more knowledge. Now, this is about 3-4 years ago. And I put together a program and started being the hospital steward out there at these events with the hospital display and talk. And it's become very popular, and I think the reason being is that we all have an interest in health care.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was providing something at the fort, a different thing that the rest weren't. So it was
You found your niche, didn't you?
I found the niche.
That's nice. That is really nice. I think we should probably get into it, because you brought a lot of instruments with you. So we'll do our best, like I said, to describe the instruments and things, but it's really going to be best if folks eventually try to track down the show and tune in and take a look at it. So I think we wanted to start with anesthesia, right?
Right, anesthesia.
Okay.
We're going to start with anesthesia. Anesthesia was one of 3 things that came out of the Civil War that really helped to improve medicine. But anesthesia is interesting. So when we talk about anesthesia, we're talking about things like ether. We're talking about things like chloroform. Put you to sleep when people operate on you. Well, let's say we're going to do an amputation. And of course, you'd like to be put to sleep.
Oh, I love
Now,
it.
during the early part of the Civil War, okay, we had ether and we had chloroform. Before that, we were using this is a stick with some leather wrapped around it that you could bite on. They might bite on a lead ball to help deal with the pain. But now we've got chloroform and ether. And the interesting thing about this, even though we had it during the early parts of the Civil War, very few surgeons would use it.
Why?
And the reason is that during this particular period in time of history, we felt that pain was ordained by God, and therefore there was a moral issue about using it. And so even though that we had this, we're still using this and holding people down.
I suppose people even said, no, I don't want to use that. I'll bite down. I'll take the pain.
Quite possible.
Oh, wow.
Well, anyway, by the end of the Civil War, universally, we're now using this, which is a good thing. Okay, so we bring a soldier in. Let's say we got to take off an arm or a leg. Let's say we got to take off an arm. We bring him in. We're going to lay him on the table, and the first thing we're going to do, luckily this guy has a doctor that says, okay, I'm going to use the chloroform.
Right.
So what we're going to do is that we're going to take what was called a chloroform funnel, which was a copper funnel with a handle on it, and on the inside we have a sponge. Okay, this is going to be held over the soldier's mouth and nose, but we have to be very careful that none of the metal touches any skin. We want to make sure we got ventilation between the two.
Okay.
Okay, because this is a dangerous procedure. During the Civil War, 4 out of every 1,000 soldiers that are given chloroform will die from the chloroform.
Why?
The reason being, this is a very, very strong substance. So we have this. Okay, we pour it into the top of the funnel.
Oh, boy.
The liquid goes down into the sponge. There are now fumes that are coming out. These fumes, that are extremely strong, if this is held down over the soldier's face, he's getting too much of it in.
Gotcha.
And that can bring his body into convulsions. It can bring on a cardiac arrest or a heart attack.
Wow.
It can close off his esophagus. He can't breathe. Well, anyway, we're lucky. Our soldier is lucky. We just gave him this and he survived.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the next thing we're going to do, let's say he just shot in the lower arm. Well, the problem with bullets in those days, when they hit a bone, they would pulverize the bone into just a zillion pieces. So what we're going to do is amputate. And the other thing to remember, during the Civil War, 3 out of every 4 soldiers, 75%, was an amputee. So they're always cutting something off. Well,
Did you say 3 out of 4?
3 out of 4. 75% was an amputee during the American Civil War.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and again, it was the bullets that were just pulverizing the bone. Okay, so now we bring our guy in. Of course, we're going to bring up his sleeve. We're going to take a tourniquet, and we're going to put the tourniquet about 2 to 3 inches above where the wound is, right up in here.
That's just a clamp with a band on it.
Right, so this would go around the arm.
Okay.
And you're going to twist it, and you're going to shut off all the blood. You want to just shut it down. Okay, now once we've done that, then we're going to take, and this is pretty scary, but this here is called a capital knife, and it's sharp on the inside, but not on the outside. This is going to be used to go between the wound and the tourniquet. We are now going to cut down through the skin and the muscle to the bone. We're going to cut in such a way that we're going to be leaving a flap of skin, because that flap of skin is going to be used later when we pull it over the stump.
Okay, okay.
Okay, now once we've done that, we're going to take what are called retractors. This is what's a double retractor, just because it has 2 single retractors. But these are used to grab the skin and the muscle to pull away from the bone, because what we're doing now is that we're making room for what's called the capital saw. This is going to be used, of course, to cut through the bone to take that arm off. Now, the good news is this is living bone. Living bone you can cut through rather quickly. Where dead bone, think of a hard steak bone, very difficult to cut through. The whole operation is going to take 15 minutes or less, because the person is in trauma. Even though they may be under anesthesia, that body is going through tremendous trauma. We want to get this over with. Okay, once we've done that, we've removed it, then we're going to take what is called a tenaculum, which is just a big hook. And this big hook, I'm going to go in and I'm going to catch each vein. I'm going to pull the vein out. Then I'm going to take silk thread, and I'm going to use that to tie off the vein.
Okay.
Now, once I've done that with all of the veins.
How many are we talking about? Do you know?
A lot, a number.
A lot. Okay, we'll go with a lot. That's good.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Once that is done, okay, and we still, let's say, have a bleeding issue. Okay, then we're going to take cauterizing tools. These are going to be heated, and these, of course, different shapes depending on what you're doing and what
They were
areas.
always sitting on fire, weren't they?
Yeah, you got to keep these things hot. Then you go in, and by touching those areas to stop the bleeding. Now, the good news is, by the time at Camp Verde, they discovered that, hey, if we take silver nitrate and apply it to the wound, this will stop the bleeding, which was a lot less painful, a lot less damage than these. So if we had this, we just didn't use these.
So the advancement in medicine is right here happening.
So we got advanced. Well, these are beginning to go away if we got the silver nitrate.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, now, once we've done that, I'm going to take what is called a bone forceps and like a big plier, but I'm going to take this, and this is going to be used to clean off the splinters, etc., that are on the end of that bone.
Okay.
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 All right. Once I've done that, then I take
big wire snip.
Big wire snip.
Okay.
And then this is called a bone file, and I'm going to use this to smooth that bone down as best I can.
God. Okay.
Once I've done that, then I'm going to take laudanum. Okay. Laudanum is a mixture of half opium and half alcohol. I'm going to apply this to the wound, which is a painkiller, to help deal with the pain. And then once I've done that, I'm going to take that flap of skin that we saved. That's going to be pulled over to and then I'm going to suture it or stitch it down, but I'm going to leave a gap because I want that gap to remain open because you're going to have fluids that are going to begin to build up in there, and it's going to work as a drain. Okay, now once I've done that...
Can we take a break? We got to take a break. We got to take a break. Bob Erb is here from Fort Verde State Historic Park. He's a part-time employee there. We're talking Civil War and early Army frontier medicine. Phone number 567-5018. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
The Q102.9 plays all the hits.
Yo, what's going on? This is Drizzy Drake.
Ariana Grande.
Maroon 5.
This is Rihanna.
I'm Shawn Mendes.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
Ed Sheeran.
What's up, guys? It's Justin Bieber.
You're listening to The Weeknd.
Start your day with Brian James in the morning. You'll get at least 10 songs in a row during your ride home with Julie Page.
Zach Sang Show.
Catch the Zach Sang Show weeknights 7 to midnight. And Kelly Fox weekends on your home for hit music. The Q102.9 and 104.9 in Prescott and Cottonwood.
This was me. And Mom and Dad. And my big brother Alex. And Jack. And this was the day that I learned that sandals get their name from sand. That jellyfish aren't made of jelly. That stars don't just come from the sky. That the ocean is bigger than all of us. This is the day we all got to forget that I was sick. And it changed everything. This was my wish.
I call you and say, I'm with the IRS. You owe back taxes, and if you don't pay today, you're going to jail. You can fix this by sending cash. Did you actually believe me? Too smart to fall for it? Well, last year, Americans paid $100 million to guys like me. 1 in 6 people were scammed. Can you believe it? Well, you shouldn't. I just made that up, too. You are a little gullible.
Welcome back to Countywide. Bob Erb in studio today from Fort Verde State Historic Park. Civil War and early Army frontier medicine. We were talking about amputation.
Right. Well, amputation was, of course, very serious. And I guess the thing to remember when you're amputating is that the closer you are to the main trunk, the greater chance that you're not going to make it.
Okay.
So the worst area was, let's say we're going to take off a leg at the hip. We're talking 88% of those people didn't get off the table alive.
Okay.
And the other thing about amputation is that when another reason why you wanted to be as far away from the main trunk is because once you did the amputation, you know, at that time we didn't know about infection, germs, etc. there was a chance that you were going to get hospital gangrene. Okay, if you got hospital gangrene, well, your chances of survival, you might have maybe 2 days. And so what they would do is go back in, go through the process again, cut that part of the arm or leg off that has gangrene, and so you have to go through the whole thing. But the thing to remember, the further away from the body, better chance, but also gives you more area to work with if we have to do a second amputation. Well, anyway, let's say...
what if I get hit by a bullet and the bullet doesn't break anything, it's just stuck inside of me?
Stuck inside, okay. So bullet. Soldier gets shot with a bullet, of course, hits the bone, pulverized. We got to do the amputation, but let's say it's in the soft tissue. The bullet didn't break anything, so all we have to do is go in after the bullet. Okay, well, what the surgeon is going to do, the first thing he's going to do is take what is called a bullet probe. And this bullet probe is going to go down into the wound. And what he's trying to do is basically, let's find that bullet.
It's like a knitting needle.
Right.
Yeah.
If he doesn't use this or doesn't have one, they're going to use the finger. And that's even worse because more internal bleeding begins to happen. Okay, but our guy got a probe, goes in there, he finds it. So the next tool that he may use is what is called a bullet extractor. Actually, this is a instrument used up through World War I.
Oh, wow.
This will go down into the wound to where that bullet is. Now, the bullet is soft lead. Now, it'd be nice if the bullet is up against a bone, gives us something to push against, but this is a screw. So if we can get this in here and we can get it next to that bullet, and we start screwing it.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
We are screwing this into the bullet so that we can just pull it out. Now, if we're lucky, maybe if it's situated right, we can go in with just a bullet forceps.
Please.
Go in, grab it, and just pull it out.
Yeah, that's a much better choice.
Right. Now, let's say you're a soldier and you're shot by an arrow. You're here at Fort Verde and you get shot by an arrow. 70% of those soldiers that got shot by arrows did not survive.
How about the bullets? We've got a percentage there?
Depends on where. Okay. If you're shot in the gut, abdomen, belly area, 87% of those soldiers died.
Okay.
The reason being we didn't know how to do internal surgery, and of course we didn't know about germs and that sort of thing. If you're shot in the chest, 62% died of those wounds. Now, to give you an idea of how medicine has gotten better, if we take the belly wound at 87%, take the same wound and we move into the 1940s to World War II, instead of 87%, 4% die.
Oh, wow.
If we go another 20 years into the Vietnam conflict of the 1960s, 1%. So we went from 87% to 1%. Hard to do much better than that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, the arrow. Soldier gets shot with an arrow. You really want to get that arrow out of the soldier within the first half hour or it becomes very difficult. And the reason being is that when an arrowhead is placed onto the shaft, it's wrapped with animal sinews, and quite often it's glued with animal types of glues. Goes into the body. Your body is warm. All of this stuff begins to loosen up.
Right.
You do not want the arrowhead to become loose from the shaft. The reason being is that if the arrowhead gets loose from the shaft, getting this out is going to be very difficult, and chances are you're not going to get it out. One reason why 70% of the people shot with arrows passed away. Okay, so it's in you, and let's say it's in soft tissue. And if it's positioned right, maybe if it's still attached to the shaft, we could push it all the way through to get it out of there. Or we would take a wire, a piece of twisted wire is all it was, and if we follow the shaft, it will take us to right where that arrowhead is, and if it's in soft tissue, this has a little loop on it. If we can get that loop around the arrow shaft right here, and then we pull, we're pulling this against the shaft, keeping it attached so we can get it out. Now let's say we're in hard tissue, in other words, it's stuck in a bone. How do we do it? We usually basically do the same thing, but we're going to use another tool, which is wire, but this is going to go down over the top of the wire, such as this. And so you're going down, and once you get to the arrowhead, then you're pulling this tight, and you're pulling up the same way.
Gotcha. We'll take another break. Bob Erb is in studio today from Fort Verde State Historic Park. He is a part-time employee there. We're talking Civil War and early Army frontier medicine. Great phone number, 567-5018. This is Countywide. Back in just a couple minutes.
The Q102.9 plays all the hits.
Yo, what's going on? This is Drizzy Drake.
Ariana Grande.
Maroon 5.
This is Rihanna.
I'm Shawn Mendes.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
Ed Sheeran.
What's up, guys?
It's Justin Bieber.
You're listening to The Weeknd.
Start your day with Brian James in the morning. You'll get at least 10 songs in a row during your ride home with Julie Page.
Zach Sang Show.
Catch the Zach Sang Show weeknights 7 to midnight. And Kelly Fox weekends on your home for hit music. The Q102.9 and 104.9 in Prescott and Cottonwood.
I didn't know where my life was going. With Wounded Warrior Project's help, I was able to get my life back in order. I thank Wounded Warrior Project not only for helping me, but also helping veterans that I know that are dealing with the same struggles that I am. Wounded Warrior Project understood what I was going through. I'm grateful that Wounded Warrior Project helped me reestablish my life. I am living proof.
Hello, I'm Jen Cohen, host of Verde Valley TV's hit TV show, The Verde Valley Experience. On each episode, we feature local organizations, nonprofits, persons of interest, events, activities, and great local musicians. It's informative, it's entertaining, it's fun. It's the Verde Valley Experience.
We meet online, and I tell you, I'm falling in love. I have to see you in person, but I need a loan for the ticket. I really think you're the one. And I really think you're desperate. Sure enough, you send cash and never see me again. Too smart to fall for this? Last year alone, 12 million Americans lost money this way. Can you believe it? You shouldn't. I made that up, too. Might not be as smart as you thought you were.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a few minutes left in the program, and we're going to jump into dental. That would not be something I would want. And none of these procedures I would have wanted back then, but dental, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, let's say, you know, you're a soldier, and of course you have a toothache, and you go to the surgeon. I guess things to remember is that back in these days, surgeons were very rarely trained in dentistry. It was on-the-job learning. But a soldier comes in, probably what they would have done, more than likely, they would have lied that person on the floor on their back. They would have straddled the chest. Hopefully they've got some anesthesia they can give this person. But they want to pull out a tooth. The first tool that they might take might have been what we call a goat's foot. Had some hooks on it. But they would get in there and try to work that tooth to get it as loose as possible. Once they've done that, they'd probably take what was called a tooth key, which had a little hook on it, and the hook kind of, think of my finger as the top of the tooth, I guess, but it hooks over the top of the tooth, and as you turn this, then it rotates that tooth out. Now,
pry tool.
Right. If you're lucky, maybe they can just go in with what was a bullet force or a tooth forceps.
If you're lucky.
And pull it out. Now, quite often, the tooth would break off at the roots. This was a common thing. And when they did that happen, they would use what is called a tooth extractor or a root extractor. And you can go down to Ace Hardware or Home Depot or whatever and buy one of these today. It's the same thing as if you're going to make a hole in wood. Well, this would go in and go up into the root canal. They would then try to screw this so that that root could be pulled out. Quite often these didn't work, and I think a lot of people back then just sort of walked around with roots in their mouth, which I think would not be a good thing. They did also fill teeth at that time. They had 4 substances that were used. One would have been pure lead. The bad thing about that is that lead poisoning, we didn't know about that at the time.
Sure.
The other thing would have been hard rubber, and that came from the Charles Goodyear Rubber Company that was used. They also used gold, and I think maybe the bad thing about gold is that maybe you'd be afraid your fellow soldiers might want your teeth in.
Right.
But the 4th item was the worst, and it was a substance called therium. Therium is a tin-like substance, and the bad thing about that, it was radioactive. Of course, we didn't know about that at the time.
Wow.
So you didn't want to have that in your mouth. They did have dental teeth, false teeth.
Okay.
And they were also made out of hard rubber by the Goodyear Rubber Company. But anyway, dentistry at that time was something you would want to...
We were all learning at that time, huh? Okay, now Bob, you are at Fort Verde State Historic Park.
Right.
on the weekends?
Generally on Saturdays and Sundays.
Generally on Saturdays and Sundays, but sometimes special groups can go in and get this.
By request.
By request,
yeah.
Okay. So the number 567-5018. Bob, thanks so much for coming in and sharing this with us. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, that is today's Countywide. We thank you for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.